Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Ruby. I'm a professional psychic medium, tarot reader, astrologer, and priestess. And today I want to talk about the Morrigan and share some of the books and decks that I have been using to get to know her and build a relationship with her. So I recently shared on my channel that a new face of deity had come in for me. And I was in the beginning stages of building a relationship with that deity. And a few of you reached out, asked me to share more about this experience and to name the deity that I had recently begun to work with. And I had to really internally check in, make sure that this was the right time for me to talk about this, because I'm still very much in the beginning stages of building a relationship with the deity. And I wanted to make sure it was okay for me to talk about this more openly. But I do feel like I've been given the green light to share about what it's been like to start working with the Morrigan. And I'm hoping this will inspire you on your own personal spiritual journey, or your own journey of connecting in with deity. So first things first, I want to say that I had no intention or desire or conscious inkling that I wanted to work with the Morrigan. Quite the opposite. I had a lot of resistance to working with the Morrigan, probably for more than one reason. I mean, the primary pantheon that I work with is the Christian pantheon. And while I work with the Christian pantheon in a non-religious, more mystical, omnist, pagan way, nonetheless, Christianity was definitely instrumental in shifting the religious and spiritual traditions of Ireland. And so I felt there might be some clash there between the Morrigan and my other pantheon. The Morrigan is an Irish deity, and even the other goddesses that I work with, like Isis and Nana, they just seem to be more complementary to, Jesus, Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary. So I didn't think the Morrigan would have any interest in working with me. And the Morrigan is often painted as a very intense and demanding deity, and she is the goddess of war, amongst other things. And that's not an energy that I feel very comfortable in or had a conscious desire to cultivate more in my life. So let's talk a little bit about the Morrigan and who she is. The Morrigan, like I said, is an Irish goddess. She is primarily a goddess of war, though she is definitely more multifaceted than that. The Morrigan is a triple goddess. The Morrigan is a title. We can say that amongst other things, it can be translated as Great Queen. Sometimes she arrives just as the Morrigan, and sometimes she shows up in a particular face of her triplicity, her triple nature. So as a triple goddess, she is Anu or Danu, Maka, and Bive. And I see these three faces of the Morrigan as the goddess being in her function as creator, sustainer, and destroyer. So if we were, for example, going to transpose this to Hindu mythology, Saraswati would be the creator, Lakshmi would be the sustainer, and Kali Ma would be the destroyer. Now, I'm not saying that these are the same deities or they're interchangeable, quite the opposite. Maka as a sustainer functions very differently and is very different in her archetypal aspects than, say, Lakshmi. But one of the functions of a goddess is her ability to create life, to sustain life, and to destroy life. And the Morrigan, being a triple goddess, functions in all of these forms, in all of these ways. So yes, the Morrigan is a goddess of war. She is also a goddess of prophecy. She is a goddess of transformation. And we can see her as a goddess of sovereignty and of power and governance, self-governance and governance over the land. She is a goddess of action and of leadership. And we could say that she is a feminine manifestation of Mars, the function of Mars, which is to conquest and to be in right relationship with anger and war and those functions of psyche and the archetypal realm. Now, I did not realize how much I needed to work with the Morrigan until she came in. And the Morrigan, I have found personally, this is my unverified personal gnosis, is a goddess of healing. And we see this with Sekhmet as well. Sekhmet is also, from the Egyptian pantheon, a goddess of war and a goddess of healing. So there's the need to destroy and then the need to heal. Right after the war is over, one heals. And for me personally, I have been in a time where it's been made very clear that there's some deeper healing that is necessary. So to not get too personal, but I feel like I can't talk about the Morrigan without getting personal. For a very long time now, I have been diagnosed with PTSD and complex PTSD. I have been in a place where that hasn't really bothered me bothered's a strange word. It hasn't impacted my life as much as it's maybe come up in the last couple of months. And I feel the Morrigan came in to share with me that I need to address and heal and work on some of these unresolved Mars issues. And it's so interesting because the Morrigan came in right at the eve of Mars retrograde, during kind of the beginning stages of the Mars-Pluto opposition that we had. And so I feel she was coming in to prep me and to start preparing me for what this Mars retrograde is going to be about for me, which Mars is about to retrograde through the signs of Leo and Cancer. And my natal Cancer is in Mars, and it's right there with my Chiron and my South Node. And so not only is the Morrigan helping me with some unresolved trauma from this life, I feel she's really forcing me to face that Mars Chiron South Node in Cancer aspect in my chart. And it's in a really tight square with my moon and my Mercury. This is my karmic work. And there's something about the Morrigan that feels very Mars, Saturn, Pluto. It's taking responsibility for oneself and self-governance and the transformation and the healing of the self towards more sovereignty and wholeness. And there's so many things about the goddess that I didn't know because I've never really researched her. I didn't know much about her other than her name and that she was the goddess of war, that would start showing up for me. So I would start working with all these fairy decks, and then it would come through that it was the Morrigan, and then, the Morrigan is actually associated with the fairy realm, and she's a fairy queen, she's a fae, and things I didn't know. People sending me stuff about Morgan Le Fay, and then finding out there's a connection between the Morrigan and Morgan Le Fay. There was all these little ways that she was showing me that she was showing up in my life that I didn't even know were connected to her until the journey continued to unfold. There's parts of her mythology that I started to have these downloads about and have these visions of, and then I would read and be like, oh, I didn't even know that there was a connection. Now, crows and wolves have always been my two animal guides forever. I've always had two crows and two wolves that I journey with and work with. And the Morrigan is very closely connected, especially to crows, ravens, but to wolves as well as horses. And similarly to my work with Mary Magdalene, to my work with Isis, as my work with this goddess continues to unfold, the more I see the parallels and synchronicities and the signs in my life. and especially in the work that I do publicly, the Morgan in her role as prophetess and in her role as seeress, and her really being this goddess of divination has really shifted and opened my eyes to some ways I may have been unconsciously working with the Morgan already and not really realizing that she is who I was working with. And that often happens on our journey of deity work. The deities that come in and choose us have often been working with us prior to them really stepping forward and making themselves known. So I'm gonna kind of jump into the books and decks that I've been working with and just see if there's anything else she wants me to say about her. I've been tending to a little altar of hers that is on my desk, and I find that candle magic and candle offerings and doing some shamanic inner journeying work with her has been really helpful and deepening the relationship. So all of the books that I have been using to learn more about her and educate myself on this path are from the same author. Stephanie Woodfield is her name, and I'm finding that her work on the Morgan is very similar in depth and breadth to the Keeping Her Keys Hecate work. Oh my gosh, what is her name? Cindy Brannon. I cannot believe that slipped out of my brain, other than the fact that we are in a Mercury retrograde. So if you really like Cindy Brennan's like Hecate body of work, Stephanie Woodfield's work on the Dark Goddess and the Morgan feels similar into what she is offering and the devotion to one goddess. Now I find that Stephanie Woodfield's work falls a little more in the priestess realm, which I have really enjoyed. I feel there's so few really great resources on what it means to be a priestess, and I'll talk more about that as I dive into the books. So the first book on my list is Celtic Lore and Spellcraft of the Dark Goddess, Invoking the Morgan. Now I have another book by Stephanie Woodfield. I think it's just called The Dark Goddess, and that book has a little bit about the Morgan, not much. And I found that book to be okay. It's been a while since I've read it, but Stephanie Woodfield is really in her sweet spot when she's writing about her patron deity, and I've enjoyed these works a lot more than I enjoyed her more generic isn't the right word, but her more generalized book on the Dark Goddess. So this has the mythology and the myth of the Morgan. It goes into her role and her function as a triple goddess, and it has a ton of resources for spellcraft. Now I haven't gone cover to cover with this book yet. I've read pretty much everything in the book in terms of the information on the mythology and the different faces and functions of the Morgan, but I haven't super dived into the spellcraft portion of this in terms of really performing any of these rituals yet. But this book is amazing. I wish that this book existed for like every single goddess that I worked with, specifically at the beginning of my journey. And then the other the next book on the list is Priestess of the Morgan by Stephanie Woodfield, Prayers, Rituals, and Devotional Work to the Great Queen. I am loving this book. I am almost finished with it, and it has been such a helpful resource for me in terms of a lot of Stephanie Woodfield's more personal experiences, not only just working with the Morrigan, but being a priestess, and a priestess that primarily works within the office of divination. This book has been so inspiring to me when it comes to my own priestess work. And I think I have done some of the more guided practices in this book as well, and used some of the prayers in this book. And then the last book on the list is Prayers to the Morrigan, an illustrated book of devotion to the Great Queen. This is by Stephanie Woodfield and Karen Storminger, and it's illustrated by Naomi Cornock, who also illustrated 2 of the decks on this list. So how I have been using this is it's just a book of prayers and recitations with this beautiful artwork. I have my ring light, so I don't know how glary this is. But Naomi Cornock's illustrations and artwork of the Morrigan is so mesmerizing to me. And this book has been just a devotion that I have been using in my morning spiritual practice to spend time with the Morrigan and to just, again, really get to know her energy, which her energy, I was very uncertain if I would feel at home in it. Again, because I just heard so much about the Morrigan and how demanding she is and how wrathful she is and how intense she is. And she's really coming forward to me in this stage that I'm working with her. I'm sure that this will change as my relationship deepens, as this very loving presence of protection. And there have been some events that have come up in my life that are really reminiscent in my life of a time when I had to really fight. And it's not so much that the Morrigan is coming in because I need to fight or go to war. She's more coming in to bring in a sense of protection and feeling resourced as I dive into some older material about times I had to really fight and be in survival mode, as well as ways in my current life how those past feelings and events are coming up. And when she comes to me, she comes a lot in the form of a raven or a crow. And she's also come to me in her form of Bive, which is definitely her more intense energy, that energy of the crone, and the crone who is washing the armor of battle, and it's graphic and it's bloody, but it hasn't been a feeling of fear that arises when she comes in that form. It feels like this invitation to cleanse and to transform. So the decks that I have been using to connect to the Morrigan, 2 of them are by the same artist, and 1 of them just came out. So one of these decks I've been working with for like a week, and they are the Old Ways Magic Oracle by Naomi Cornock, who is the same illustrator of the book. And then this is, what is the name of this deck? The Call of the Morrigan Oracle. And this is by Stephanie Woodfield, who wrote the books that I just showed you, and Naomi Cornock. And so a lot of the resources are coming from the same writer and illustrator. The Old Ways Magic Oracle I've worked with slightly longer than the Call of the Morrigan Oracle, which I've had for like a week. So I want to kind of get into both of these decks. So this is just by Naomi Cornock. This is such a Morrigan illustration. And this has been a direct line for me to connect in with the Morrigan. And the messages that I receive from the Old Ways Magic Oracle are very, very spot on. They're very succinct, meaning I really only need to pull like 2 or 3 cards. And they're beautiful portals. And it just feels like it's so connected to the Morrigan's energy, and a deck where you don't really need to study the guidebook. You don't need to learn the system. It's all right there in the artwork and the card title. Now, I have, I think, 2 of my Patreon community members that have been trying to get me to purchase this deck for a while. And I did purchase it. I think I got it like, I purchased it for, and then there was a long time while I waited for it to be shipped from England. So this deck came just in time for me to really consecrate it to working with the Morrigan. And I've only used it so far to pull in messages from her and cultivate a relationship with her. Because she is a goddess of divination and prophecy, I have been using divination as the primary way to get to know her and to build a relationship with her. I can maybe do a full-on review of this deck another time. I don't mind this slippery cardstock, except with the size of the cards. I find this deck so hard to shuffle, and I have very small hands. So if your hands are a normal average size, maybe you won't have this issue. But I love this deck and struggle to shuffle with it. And the cardstock is really similar to like the Compendium of Witches cardstock. So it's not, I mean, it's gonna last. I feel like this leads to a lot of longevity, but this is not my favorite deck to shuffle. So this is the Call of the Morrigan Oracle. These backings are beautiful. Similarly beautiful artwork. This deck is a deck that is solely for connecting in with the Morrigan's energy, very similar to the Goddess Oracle decks by Alana Fairchild, the Oracle of the Hecatean Path by Chris Butler and Ken Payne. Is that the name of the creators of those decks? Now, in terms of artwork, I love this deck so much more than the Oracle of the Hecatean Path. But similarly to the Oracle of the Hecatean Path, I feel it's very connected in with the Morrigan's energy. The guidebook for this is lovely. I can do a full review of this deck. Look how beautiful this is. But I do find this reads slightly differently than the Old Ways Magic Oracle. If you aren't familiar with the Morrigan's mythology and some of the other characters in her lore, you might need the guidebook before you can really start reading this deck intuitively. Perhaps that could be the case. And I've used the Old Ways Magic Oracle for these like really precise, clean messages, whereas these card pulls feel like something that is meant to be really sit with and journeyed with and taken in a little more. But it's so early on me connecting with these decks. Maybe I'll feel differently a little later on. And I'm really, really loving this deck. If you are connected to the Morrigan, what a gift. Such beautiful artwork. Like, this is everything I really want in a deity deck. It's a beautiful size. It feels like it is very faithful and true to the deity's energy, and the artwork is just stunning. Look at that, and the backings are stunning too. So that is the Call of the Morrigan Oracle. It just came out. Like, I don't think it's even officially out yet. I just pre-ordered this deck and I got my pre-order early. So yay, it's been lovely to have that to work with. Now, the other decks that I have been using to work with the Morrigan, one of my all-time favorite decks with some of my least favorite cardstock, the Murder of Crows Tarot. This is really, really profound and just perfect in its energy for working with the Morrigan. I think particularly in her form as 5, this is a very shadow work oriented deck for me. This is a deck when I ready to hear the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and it is not always the nicest medicine, but I don't even care because I love the world building of this deck so much, and I could just live in this deck and spend time in this deck all day. And there's something so gothic and dreary in the best way possible. It's like the perfect winter deck. This deck just goes really well with my seasonal depression. I'm not even gonna lie to you. So that's the Murder of Crows. And then the other tarot deck that I have been using to work with the Morrigan, and I was doing daily draws with this deck before the Call the Morrigan Oracle came in to really receive messages from the Morrigan, was the Witch Sister Tarot. I really enjoy this deck for personal work. I have not used it in client readings. To me, this has been a deck that I use really closely with the guidebook. Really nice guidebook to this one. And it's kind of like at the border of a tarot and an oracle, because I do feel that the deck creator, Julia Jeffrey, some of the card descriptions, I feel she's almost reimagining or almost giving that archetype a different direction or coloring or nuance. But the artwork is lovely. Again, this is not my favorite cardstock, but for the artwork and the energy and how unique this deck is, I love it. And then the last deck that I have been using to connect in with the Morrigan is the Fairies Oracle by Brian Fround. This is like an older oracle deck. I got this recently, and I'm the only person that's gotten this recently. I feel like everyone has had this deck for 100 years. I'm really loving working with this deck. I've never worked with it before. I got it because I felt this very strong like urge to out of nowhere, and it was kind of in my very beginning journey of the Morrigan reaching out to me. And this deck, I think, is a shadow work deck. I feel like all fairy decks, fae decks have that type of feeling tone to them, but really great guidebook, really beautiful artwork. And so usually kind of like kick me in the butt what I need to hear. So that is the Fairies Oracle by Brian Fround. Now, I'm sure there's many other decks that would be really aligned for working with the Morrigan. If you work with a deck not on this list, feel free to put it in the comments. This is just what I am currently using in my own personal practice with the Morrigan. I've also been connecting in with her through song. So singing to the Morrigan with my harmonium at the altar, and that's been a really magical unfolding as well. So very much still in the beginning stages of my journey with her. I'm sure I'll have so much more to say 3 months, 6 months, a year into this process. And I don't know how long she's gonna stay around. Like, I don't know if she's gonna stay forever, if I'm gonna do some concentrated work with her and then she's gonna peace out. But when she's here, she's here. Like, sometimes I have deities come in and they're like, okay, I'm here, but I'm just gonna be in the corner somewhere. And the Morrigan's like really come in and like taken up my whole practice. And all my other deities are kind of sitting in the back row, just like, hey, I'm still here, but you're supposed to be working with the Morrigan right now. And so It's been a unique departure from my usual spiritual path, and I'm curious how it will continue to unfold, because I really have no idea what's next, or how deep this work will go, or where it will take me. So that's all for now. I am sending you love, and I will see you soon.